Hey guys, Zibboyeye or just Zib is fine, and today we're looking at a pair of anime movies based on classic Japanese stories. In this episode, we'll look at Night on the Galactic Railroad and the life of Budori Gusuko based on works of literary figure Kenji Miyazawa. In 1896, Kenji Miyazawa was born in rural Iwate Prefecture. However, in contrast to the poor farmers that neighbored him, Miyazawa was heir to a wealthy pawnbroking family. His father owned the pawn shop, and despite the luxury the business provided, the privilege it came with embarrassed Kenji. This can be seen in a poem by a middle school-age Kenji reading, "Father, father, why, in front of the superintendent, did you wind your large silver watch?" For that matter, seeing his family wealth built on the valuables of the already impoverished farmers led him to resent commerce as a whole. In fact, Miyazawa put his money where his mouth was, and spat it back out. That is to say, he signed off his right to inheritance to his brother. But Miyazawa's transgressions with his father don't end there. The Miyazawa household followed Jodo Shinshu Buddhism. However, in high school, Kenji became enamored with Nichiren Buddhism, to the point that he would futilely attempt to convert his family to his faith. His most despairing family trouble, though, involved his younger sister Toshi, who became frequently ill in adulthood. She died at the age of 24, a loss that haunted Miyazawa then onward. 2 years later, in 1924, he started penning Night on the Galactic Railroad. Miyazawa never completed the middle of the book, neither did he see its publication a decade later, as he died at the age of 37 in 1933. Which brings us to 1985. Miyazawa has become an icon in Japanese literature and group tacked sets to animate his seminal work. With direction from Gisaburo Sugi, the film became a classic in anime. So how about we see why? Let's climb aboard and look at Night on the Galactic Railroad. The story follows a young boy named Giovanni. He tries to enjoy the town's festival of stars, but sneered at by his school bully, Giovanni runs off to a hilltop to be alone. Suddenly, a large train manifests before him. He boards the locomotive, where he finds his best friend Campanella. The two then ride the route on a trip through the galaxy. The visuals stuck with me. Space is nowadays associated with sci-fi, but the film approaches that setting with a wonderment that paints an immersive fantasy. At the same time, it's not without a certain darkness that conveys the daunting unknown of the universe. The characters are a distinguishing feature of this adaptation. The book stars humans, so why does the anime give us anthro cats? Well, aside from why wouldn't you want an existential space journey about colorful cats, the reason goes back to another work. Sugi lacked confidence in a visual portrayal for the cast until stumbling upon a then-recent adaptation. In 1983, Hiroshi Masumura retold Night on the Galactic Railroad in manga featuring felines. Sugi knew this was it, the image his film would take after. Masumura is also an interesting figure that I just had to talk about while on the subject. While I say his manga released in '83, it also released in '85, 2016, and 2020. He's remade it thrice. Masumura is a scrupulous reader of the source material. Okay, this will be hard to convey to English speakers, but follow me on this. Originally, he drew the rail cars large, like they rumble goton goto. However, in the book, the train hums goto goto, meaning it's a slimmer, lighter railway. He redrew it as such. It goes to show the longevity and intricate ambiguities people see in this story. Back to the anime though, I really like its character designs. Everyone's going to be calling me a furry for this, but I don't care. I love their paws. They aren't like hand paws like other cartoons. Look at these little cat paws, they're paws, they're so cute! The two leads' faces are also of note. They're so stoic. Outside of select reactions, it can be hard to tell how they feel from face alone. It's one of the few times I applaud this in animation. Their stoned face allows the viewer to imprint his or her response onto it. as though we are free to feel as we do, unimposed by that intended of the character. That being said, before the visuals, the tone struck me early on. Think about some animation title drops you remember. How does Night on the Galactic Railroad open? Did I just enter Dracula's castle? Jokes aside, it's the perfect preface. The otherworldly music drew me in. The soundtrack as a whole aptly conveys the unique set of tones. Despite its colorful characters, the film scarcely ever indulges in comedy. The most reliable relief is the comfort of Campanella. Otherwise, the journey can feel ethereal, lonely, even liminal. This owes thanks to the atmosphere-building silence. The abundance of lengthy, dead air surprised me, especially for a work open to younger demographics. It trusts the viewer's patience, but for some it may test their patience. The kids' first stop may mislead expectations. They disembark at a galaxy station and explore before rushing back to the train, barely returning in time for its departure. But for the rest of the second act, the duo stay in the confines of the cabin. Rather than a space adventure, it's more akin to a galaxy-wandering tour that's less concerned with excitement and more with emotion and philosophical quandaries. But before we get to the latter, I'll address the writing that has a surrealist tinge to it. Giovanni accepts a lot of his sights rather quickly.
That's okay.
What a neat map!
I like it. We don't need someone to stop and go, "That's weird," we can tell. It streamlines the script. That being said, outside of Campanella, most of the characters aren't too memorable. The protagonist in particular may provide a hurdle for some viewers too. Giovanni doesn't steer the narrative. Everything that happens would occur even in his absence. I mean, the plot is literally on rails. Giovanni does learn a lesson, but it's not in a typical arc structure. There's no dramatic culmination of what he's learned to fulfill the climax. So regardless, Giovanni represents the film's non-traditional narrative. Giovanni is a shy kid who listens and learns, good qualities for a child. Unfortunately, his reactive rather than proactive character renders the movie less engaging. And this made me think. What we resonate with in media reflects us as viewers. We look for action in a protagonist. Even when they learn something, inner growth alone won't satisfy us. We need action to validate it. In contrast to a society in which self-development is paramount, this narrative likely pleases. This seems to indicate that we value that which yields tangible results over personal internal betterment. But I kinda widened the scope there, didn't I? So let's narrow our perspective back to the movie, particularly its core ideas. One of its strong philosophical pillars can be summed up in my favorite quote from this.
But I think people are happiest when they do something truly good. If people really tried to do their best, then I think everyone could be happy.
And that true goodness derives from altruistic acts. Later on, a girl tells a story about the constellation Scorpio. The scorpion feasted on smaller bugs. However, when faced by a weasel, the scorpion ran in fear and fell down a well. Regretting his life will go to waste rather than sustaining another creature, he begs God to use his body for the true happiness of everyone. Thus he bursts into flames, illuminating the night from then on. This is the second time fire is mentioned. The first is at the Pliocene coast.
Every grain of sand is a crystalline jewel. There's a spark of fire inside every one of them.
Flame, what brought the galaxy happiness. The sand represents people. In other words, everyone has the potential to support others and achieve happiness. But I've yet to discuss the more personal meaning I see in this story. I was caught off guard by the film's overt references to religion. On top of that, characters refer to a place known as the True Heaven. But don't be mistaken, the film by no means supports zealotry. A character comments this regarding his environment.
It all depends on who might be looking at it. To someone else, this whole area might appear to be air, or water, or an empty patch of sky.
This subjectivity returns later when a Christian boy, girl, and tutor accompany our two leads.
Look, crows out the window. Oh yeah, there's a whole bunch of them outside.
Those aren't crows. They're magpies, actually.
Oh.
But of course, neither of those can turn into apples. They just see the same thing differently. In that sense, there is no true heaven. Everyone's heaven is their true heaven. Furthermore, look at the text on their journey. It's Esperanto, a language designed to act as a universal communication. Not only that, but human or cat, anyone is allowed to board the train. It's an inclusive service. There is no true heaven, they're all equal stops on the same track. From an author who attempted to convert his family and even preached on the street, this theme is unexpectedly impartial. And I think I know why that is. A peculiar moment occurs during ticket inspection.
That's an incredibly rare ticket. It can take you to the true heaven. Why, with that ticket, you can go everywhere this train runs.
This ticket symbolizes Giovanni's spiritually open mind. Perhaps Miyazawa had or wished he had this ticket to see his dearly departed sister. After all, she died Jodo Shinshu while he followed Nichiren.
My ticket is different. Can my ticket take me where you're going?
What worth is faith if it will part you from your loved ones when all is said and done? The story is born from Miyazawa's grief while exploring the hope that he will see his little sister again. I'll speak briefly on the ending. Honestly, I feel like I already spoiled the movie given its emphasis on raw ideas. That aside, bigger spoilers until this time, and let's get to it. Really, Campanella had just passed. This is his trip to the afterlife. Giovanni gives chase to his friend, but to no avail. He wakes up on the hilltop. Back at town, he finds out Campanella drowned, having saved Zanelli, the class bully who had fallen in the river. Reflecting on his journey with his friend, Giovanni vows to do all he can for the happiness of everyone. Campanella's untimely death only serves to create another parallel to Toshi. His passing has a tragic irony to it as well. Giovanni's best friend dies to save Giovanni's bully. In addition, it also demonstrates Campanella's and the story's devotion to their own ideals. Night on the Galactic Railroad is hauntingly ethereal. Its visual design played to the narrative's strengths. I was taken by the tones the movie achieves, but its slow pace and philosophy over action approach to storytelling may deter viewers. But in the end, I admire its humanitarian convictions and love its espousal of spiritual coexistence. I can't say it's a consistently entertaining watch, but where else can you see something like this? There's a reason it's lingered in people's heads all these years. Now, before I get to the pseudo-sequel, I wanted to look at something else. Like Kenji's Trunk, an anthology special from 1996 that I only wanted to bring up because its opening reminds me of another important literary figure. Man, now I gotta play the best part of the song too. Actually, I'll take a quick look at Spring and Chaos, a 1993 non-theatrical film that shares DNA with Galactic Railroad. Produced again by Group TAC, Spring and Chaos follows the life of Kenji Miyazawa. From what I researched, it's a pretty accurate depiction. Although I couldn't verify the conflict between Miyazawa and friend poet Kanai Hosaka. It's hard to find any info on the guy in English, but he is real. As you can see, it continues the Anthro-Cat caricatures from Galactic Railroad. A wise decision combining both historical and modern filmic legacy. The animation may not seem much, but it kicks it into overdrive in this homage to Miyazawa's work. It's a beautiful, energetic burst of style. But otherwise, I didn't get much out of it. Viewers unfamiliar with Miyazawa may enjoy learning about his life and eccentricities. But story-wise, it didn't come together that gratifyingly for me. It's only 57 minutes though, so not a big time sink. Anyways, let's move on to the next anime. In 2008, Group Tech announced an adaptation of the 1932 novel The Life of Budori Gusuko, with Gisaburo Sugi directing once more. His work due to hit the big screen just the following year. Unfortunately, missing that date and facing immense debts, the studio filed for bankruptcy and shut their doors in 2010. But the book hadn't closed on production just yet. A year later, Tezuka Productions saved the project from the depths of would-be lost media and got it back on its feet. But it stood on precarious ground as the studio couldn't ensure a proper budget for its completion. Soon enough though, thankfully, as an initiative to support cinematic arts, the Japanese government supplemented funding. The anime premiered in 2012, thus this Blu-ray I'm holding. But before I pop this in, real quick I want to address a certain article that caught my attention. During its announcement, Sadayuki Murai, writer of one of my favorite anime films ever, Perfect Blue, was set to script this adaptation. For reasons I couldn't find, that fell through. Instead, Gisaburo Sugi directs and scripts the movie. But I'm not complaining, we're lucky it even came out. So without further ado, let's appreciate the mere existence of and look at the life of Budori Gusuko. The story takes place in the land of Ihatov, following Budori Gusuko, a boy living with his younger sister named Nettie and their mother and father. Enduring a sudden cold spell that has plagued the village's crops, his parents search the frozen forest for food. Hungry, the brother and sister await their parents' return until a mysterious being kidnaps Nettie. With his family now gone, Budori journeys forward, helping new faces in new places along the way. You've probably noticed the familiar visuals. The movie recycles many character designs from Galactic Railroad, so many of my compliments there apply here. An unusual practice, but I think I like it. It's almost akin to seeing an actor you like in a new role. The previously mentioned mangaka Hiroshi Masamura handled the new designs. They fit well mostly. I'm particularly fond of the kidnapper. Tall, flowing cape, the piercing glare, he's just cool. I don't know, maybe he's my onceler. You heard my paw rant, I have nothing to lose. But the set pieces steal the show. It occasionally deals in surrealist environments when in what I'll call the other realm. But Ihatov is no slouch. With lush forests and intricate cities, the setting is all around convincing. I like its imagery, but it also makes me appreciate the style of its predecessor. The thin-lined characters and finely textured backdrops lend precision to Budori Gusuko's art direction. But the thicker line work of Galactic Railroad pops against its scenery. The looser, painterly renderings of the backgrounds also tickles my fancy. Neither is better or worse per se, modern technology just helps artists achieve this higher fidelity easier. But dang, I admire the aesthetics older animation pulls off. But enough about sight, what about the feel? There are some heavy moments, some frantic, and bits of humor too. The best of the latter comes from my favorite side character, Redbeard, an energetic yet disorderly farmer.
I'm gonna show you a neat magic trick.
Honey, where are you off to?
The script is paced more actively than Galactic Railroad, and thus better adheres to the expectations of an average audience. This extends to the protagonist. Budori pushes through each period of his life to its respective conclusion. His impact on progression is clear. However, he doesn't traverse these episodes, so to speak, self-propelled. This is to say, his character forgoes a dramatic motive. From the synopsis, you may assume he ventures to find his sister, but he neither seeks out nor inquires into the kidnapper, at least in Ihatov. 2 out of 3 of the times he winds up in the other realm, he attempts to confront the mysterious cat. However, notice the keyword winds up. He never enters nor leaves there on his own accord, to the point that, even in Ihatov, he further winds up at different jobs. So although a more active protagonist than Giovanni, Budori's lacking motive weakens his plot momentum and rallying investment. I mentioned the other realm earlier, so I might as well talk about its most interesting scene. Budori's second encounter with this world rings a few bells. That's right, it's a galaxy station from Night on the Galactic Railroad, although likely not the same one as seen here. In Galactic Railroad, though we can't see it all, the sign seems to read Pliocene Marbodo La Statio Galaxia, or Pliocene Coast Galaxy Station, while the one in Budori Gusuko drove me a bit crazy. Unlike Galactic Railroad's Esperanto, the language of Ihatov is fictional, so I had to find the letters from the sign elsewhere and translate their Japanese to Romaji to figure out what they signify. Long story short, one letter was really difficult to find, and if this doesn't prove I'm autistic, I don't know what will. I ended up spending an hour and a half or more making an Ihatov-ish translation document. Now I can finally read the wall. Juni-K Eki, or 12K station. I was stuck. None of the definitions for K made any sense. Until, exhausted, I messed about typing and stumbled upon something. This tower resembles Ryokaku, also known as Asakusa 12 Stories, or Asakusa Junikai. Juni-K Eki. Junikai Eki. They made a spelling error. I guess I can't blame them. It's a fake language and no one in their right mind, aka I, was going to study it. So yeah, it's 12-story station. Not like it means much. But I can devote at least a minute of my review to it, at least as some validation to my sanity loss. But anyways, let's bury that tangent and talk about the setting's actual substance. The connection to Galactic Railroad adds to the two works. For one, Giovanni and Budori both see their home language in this dimension. It suggests that the writing isn't constant but depends on who views it, which further backs the inclusionary motif of Galactic Railroad. For two, it expands on the scale of the kidnapper's domain. This hits the audience rather than the character, curating an understated tension. There's also this moment that feels right at home with Galactic Railroad. The pause to observe strange imagery, it must be an homage to that movie's pace. Lastly, the Christians from the last movie cameo. I don't know why they're normal while everyone else looks fresh from a freak show, but apart from that, it's neat. Campanella mentions having gone through a galaxy station prior to boarding the express, so perhaps this is the station these three began their journey at. But the thing that turned my head after watching the life of Budori Gusuko was the realization that it's the life of Kenji Miyazawa. The loss of a younger sister speaks for itself, but more parallels present themselves, such as Budori studying fertilizer to help Redbeard's harvest. Miyazawa too studied the science of soil. In fact, he quit a college teaching gig in 1926 to pursue a life of farming, during which he shared his knowledge to the benefit of his fellow agrarians. This fact took me aback. This affluent son rejected his inheritance to live as a peasant. Budori's trip from Redbeard's farm to the imposingly massive Sanmutri city may derive from an overwhelmed Miyazawa having grown up in impoverished Iwate and later witnessing the grand scale of Tokyo. Budori's work at the Ihatov Volcano Bureau may even lift inspiration from Miyazawa's 2-year stint as a special research assistant in geology. It's not strictly biographical, of course, but closer to a recollection of experiences creatively infused into a narrative. A prime example of an artist mixing bits of themselves to paint their piece. And we see the big picture in the ending, so spoilers until this time, and let's get to it. The kidnapper indicts Budori of trespassing in the other realm. The Blue Cat then awakes to the news of an imminent cold spell. Traumatized by the last, Budori resolves to stop it by any means necessary. At that declaration, the kidnapper appears offering help, but not free of charge. With no other option, Budori forfeits his life to save Ihatov. The twist left me with a sense of solace. After Budori's wish to stop the sudden cold, the kidnapper says,
"You there. I only came because you've called me to you."
In other words, Nettie too gave herself up. Which brings me to Budori's sacrifice to save everyone, supporting a message that one's greatest purpose is to do all they can to help others. A concept that Night on the Galactic Railroad ended on too. Beyond representing a key value of the author, the overlapping themes unify the two films. The Life of Budori Gusuko is a movie that, given its playing second fiddle to a classic, I'm glad to spotlight. The detailed backdrops draw in the eye. Compared to the prior outing, the tone and pace lend to a greater accessibility. Albeit weak in certain spots, the story leads up to a strong and familiar message. On first viewing, I actually preferred this to Galactic Railroad, likely due to its more conventional watchability. But the second go-around, I got a bigger kick out of Night on the Galactic Railroad. Even if its slow lingering pace and atypical narrative may not be for everyone, it makes it special and I can't think of much else like it. But regardless, both works share the selfless and humanitarian philosophy Miyazawa stood by in life. I've been Zibboyeye, or just Zib is fine, and thank you for watching. Zibbo bye bye!